am joined by our client services manager, Olivia. Many of you guys would have come across Olivia in your dealings, either on the phone or on email, about things that are going on with the ATO or paperwork or engagements and things like that. And we've got Ollie in for this video today to help us out, talk about debt collection, because fortunately or unfortunately for her, that is one of her roles with us, is to basically help collect our outstanding debts. Now, for those of you that joined my webinar a couple of weeks ago, you'll remember me talking about how important it is to stay on top of our debtors at this time during COVID pandemic. So I thought, who better to get in to give some tips and insights in relation to that, but Ollie. So welcome, Ollie, to your first video.
Thank you, Andrew. Great to be here.
Are you excited?
Oh, so excited.
So excited. So you've been doing our debt collection for a little while now, for a few months. Tell us just quickly about your experience in it. And I know we've got a presentation that we'll run through in a second, but especially in the current environment, how are you finding it personally? Because I know it's a challenging thing to do.
Yeah, debt collection can be challenging. However, I think I've got a bit of a luxury behind me with the fact that I've already had relationships with the clients prior to needing to have this role in debt collection. Yep. So already there's some familiarity and a bit of an understanding with their backgrounds and situations. So cool. That makes it a little bit easier to have those conversations. And I guess being confident with the processes that we've got in place makes those conversations a little bit easier with the clients as well. Yep. When you've got a robust system backing you up yep. to be able to follow through.
Cool. All right, so we'll crack in. What I'm going to do is I've just got a slideshow, so I'm going to share my screen, and we'll run through that, and we'll talk about that as we go. So give me 2 seconds, team. Hopefully you can see that. Ollie, can you see that?
Yep, that is all clear.
And I'm just going to turn myself off. Cool. So yeah, this is, like I said, it's just a quick little video about debt collection tips, checklists and tips they can obviously go away and implement in their own business. So obviously a bit of background to start. In my time as an advisor, there's a number of things that cause problems with debt collection. And the simple thing that I'll say is that the longer you wait, the harder it is to get your money. The normal problems that we see are listed up on there, but Ollie, you often have challenging conversations with business owners at different points in time. What is, we've got some stuff up on the screen there, but what are the things that you see? What makes your job hard when you're collecting bills?
Okay, so I could probably break it down to maybe 5 or 6 key items. Obviously, you flagged in there the timing and the errors. So I would first say, in the first instance, surprises. Obviously, none of our clients like surprises. So I think if we can be in a position where we're communicating pricing with clients right from the start, so they have full disclosure of what they're expecting, and then don't get a surprise invoice at the end of it, which raises questions. That's always a good way to start.
Yep.
Processes, absolutely. I think the biggest issue that we have when processes fall down. So ensuring that your processes are robust and having the least amount of human intervention as possible. If you can automate your processes as much as possible, things tend to flow better. As soon as human intervention happens, or someone breaks process or tries to do something manual, I think that's when the communication can break down, and that's when we can have issues as well. Yep. Timing's also an issue. Where you can invoice upfront is always the best process. Then you know that the invoice is in the system, the money's in the system. Trying to send an invoice after the fact, especially if it gets missed at the time of action, and it might fall into a month or two afterwards. The follow-up for that can be sometimes embarrassing, so try to avoid sending invoices out quite a few months after the transaction has occurred. And errors, obviously, if it goes out with the wrong price or the wrong terms, that can also create an issue, which once again comes back to communication up front. So we all know the pricing and the terms that's all agreed upon with the clients. Reminders also seem to be a really big either plus or can be a letdown if there are no reminders in place. That all comes to the automated side of it, if possible, and that continuous follow-up. If you can make it automated, less manual intervention, so that when you do finally need to get involved, it takes the pressure off from a manual perspective. And just delivery in the first instance. I guess I can't believe how many times you've been told, oh, I never got that invoice. So if you can have systems that turn around and demonstrate that that invoice has been delivered, then that's a great start as well.
Yeah, cool. So the key things there, and the key things that create problems, like you say, if you're not doing your invoicing regularly, if your invoicing is not correct, if you're not communicating and agreeing frameworks with clients and things like that up front, that obviously can create problems in collecting money on the other side. And I think the important thing to note here for business owners is that there is a difference between doing the work and there is a difference between collecting the money. They are two different things. And so we're talking about obviously collecting the money, but if you can make sure that things get done of doing the work and getting stuff out and getting things communicated, you're a lot more likely to collect the money on the other side. Cool. Thanks for that, Ollie. The other thing that I would say is, so often, and Ollie, you'd be aware, we've got pretty clear rules in our business in terms of how we engage with our clients in terms of our agreed pricing and engagement and so forth up front, and payment up front before we do anything. And it's our business, they're our rules, and if people want to do business with us, that's the rules that they need to work by. It's always amazing to me how many business owners accept somebody else's rules, and they might have credit terms in place, or might have, I'll give you an example, they might have 14-day terms on payment of invoices, and yet the customer comes to them and said, well, we only pay 30 days at the end of the month, and they say, yeah, that's okay. The reality is that it's your business, it's your rules. You need to enforce those rules. And if the customers that aren't prepared to fall in line with that, I think that becomes a bigger conversation about whether they actually want to be your customers at all. So I think as part of a debt collection process, I can't stress that side of this enough. Now, in terms of that, there's no framework that actually is, you establish the rules that are there for your business, but when we're setting some of the rules, I guess we've got a bit of a checklist that we've got, or we've established to help people go through and do this and implement this in their own business. And we'll talk about this as we go through. The first thing I'll say is, whatever your rules are, stick to them. As soon as you don't stick to your rules and you let somebody do something outside that framework, then they're not really rules. You're accepting a different framework for doing business. You're actually working by their rules, and it's important that you manage that and control that in line with your business frameworks. The second thing that I would say is, make sure your collection process is up to date. And Ollie, we've gone through a fair bit of work to make sure that we've revisited what that process looks like to help make your job easier and to obviously help clients understand what's going on. Other things there, having clear credit terms for clients when they come on board. Your team and your customers must understand what those credit terms look like, whether they're credit limits, all those sort of things, payment terms, discount terms, all that falls into that framework and should be agreed and signed off with the customers. And your front end team, your sales team, your delivery team need to understand that. And the other thing that I would say, don't offer credit lightly. Just because you've done a good job doesn't mean there's a guarantee that somebody's going to pay you. So be very strict when you've got, especially new customers that want to come on board, and have a credit limit in place. Ollie mentioned it before about regular invoicing, daily if possible. You have to monitor your aging schedules regularly, and Ollie will talk about process in a sec, from your perspective. But, the starting point I know for your process is to check your aging schedule, and you do that regularly to see who's not playing by the rules. We offer various payment terms for clients, whether that be different types of credit card, whether it be funding arrangements. I would suggest businesses look into having different alternatives in place for them. And the last thing there that we got is, having scripts for collection calls. And Ollie, I know you work from that stuff as well. So let's then talk about process. You do this every week or every couple of weeks when you chase up stuff. What's the process that you go through when you're about to jump on? And what's the mindset that you find yourself getting in before you make that first collection call?
Yeah, so from my perspective, like you'd mentioned before, making sure that you enforce your rules. Obviously, most companies will have processes set up based upon those fundamental rules that you've established in the first instance. So when you spoke about making sure that you adhere to them, pointing out the fact that as soon as you break those rules, it usually means that the process then gets broken in order to manage any different variations. And that's when we come into risk of those processes not being followed, and therefore everything can get out of hand. So I always like to work on the basis that if our processes are followed to the T, the conversation actually really shouldn't be that hard with the clients when we're making those calls. So I will review and look at what our age debtors are looking like. So our current process is that we have automated reminders set up in our system. So as soon as an invoice is flagged as overdue, they will get a reminder at 7 days, they'll get a reminder at 14 days and 21 days. So I really only have to have some input and start to act upon any of the invoices that are overdue once they reach 28 days. So I can feel confident that we've communicated to the best of our ability to get those reminders in the system and have them pay by the time that's required.
Yep.
Once it gets to the 28 days, that's when I have to start communicating with the client, pick up the phone call and have that conversation with them. So it's a lot easier to speak with confidence and authority when you are confident that your systems have the correct audit trail to prove that you've tried to make contact with them in regards to that.
Yep. So back to those systems and processes. Good. Yep.
Correct. So then I guess it's literally a conversation, and it's actually a really good starting point to, I guess, confirm with them, have they actually been receiving the communication that we've been sending through? So you might actually find at this point you've got a wrong email address or a wrong phone number, or your database might not be up to date. So I normally try to start with just breaking the ice and confirming that they are in fact receiving the communication that we're sending them, and then that also gives us the opportunity to update our system with correct details if required. Once we've established that, then it's a conversation just to say, hey, what's going on with your circumstances? Obviously, we've sent you this communication. Are you having any issues that are preventing you from payment? And then that's when we can have a conversation with the client, showing empathy to their situation, but still being confident with the fact that we are within our right to request the information, but if there is something that we can potentially do for them and give them an option for alternative payment terms, that's when that conversation will happen. So we've got a couple of situations or a couple of options that we can give our clients, but this is where we start those negotiations in the first instance.
Yep. So what I've heard there is having a script being hard on the issue, but being sympathetic or empathetic to the person and their circumstances. They might be in a bit of a hard spot. the other thing that I heard there is the confidence bit with you, and I think that debt collection can be hard. You know, it's a job that I don't like. I put my hand up, you know, ringing up and asking people for money. But I think the important thing to remember is that you shouldn't feel guilty about it. You've done the work, you've done a good job. You know, you've agreed to the framework with the client. You shouldn't feel guilty about the fact that they haven't paid you and that you need to chase it up. So I think there's some good mindset points there. The other thing that I was saying in relation to that I picked up, Ollie, was, you know, obviously those auto reminders are not sending statements. And I think the technology allows, whether it be with Xero, Mob, QuickBooks or whatever, for auto reminders to be sent out automatically. And so you should be using technology wherever you can. And then obviously enforcing securities and stopping credit. Now, if it gets beyond that, you know, when you get to that point where you've had that conversation, how do you tie some of these things off? So, you know, somebody, you know, might be struggling to pay, or they might have a cash flow issue or whatever. What's the key things to move those conversations forward from your perspective, Ollie?
So in the first instance, you want to try to come to a negotiation, an agreement with the client. So if they can make a commitment to make instalment payments or postpone a payment, obviously we want to be able to do right by the client in that instance. So when you have authority to make those decisions and approve those terms, then obviously if you can get a commitment out of the client that you both agree on, but the biggest step with that is also making sure that you're following up. So you need to document any plans or commitments that you're going into with the clients, and then making sure you're following that up. So if the client commits, I will be able to make an instalment payment next month, making sure that you're on top of that. And if that payment hasn't come through in the next month, having that additional phone call with the client to say, hey, we had an arrangement, we were expecting payment to come through today. Is there still any further issues that's presenting that? Do we need to look at alternative options? We have the option of using a third-party provider who can sometimes step in and pay the invoice in full on our behalf and then offer longer payment terms with the client. So potentially the client might be looking at, 12-month installments rather than being able to make a lump sum all in one hit. So if we're able to offer, funding externally, that will then potentially assist them with payment. We try to make sure that those options are available, because the last case we want is have to refer anyone to debt collection. So we try to wear the brunt of the negotiation where we can. But unfortunately, in some instances, if it needs to go to debt collection, then that's probably the last step that we've got in our toolkit, I guess.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, I reckon there's some great tips in there. Like I said at the start, it's an important time to stay on top of your debt collection. I think your insights have been really helpful, Ollie, so thank you for sharing. And if anybody wants more information or wants to help or needs some help to get a debt collection process in place, please feel free to reach out to myself or Kristen or one of your advisors, and we'll see what we can do to help you out. So thanks, everybody, for joining us.
Thanks, guys.